Hey, hi everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Psychology Performance Professional Discussion. So we've had a range of guests on so far, more traditional maybe from the coaching background. We've had someone from a neuroscience background, someone from an art background, and we've got a different lens again today with someone, I won't kind of spoil the story, but a different background again. So a really fascinating guest to have on. To maybe look at how football can be run from a slightly different perspective. So, Debbie, if you don't mind, could you give us a little bit around your background and how that's led into kind of your football life and creation of Salisbury Rovers?
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much, Tom and James, for inviting me on today. So the story of how football has ended up taking over my life in in a nutshell. I have got no traditional background in football at all. I'm from that age where girls really weren't allowed to play unless they played informally. And I certainly never coached or anything before my son turned about 9 or 10. And he joined our club. He'd been playing like sort of pick-up football, I suppose, street football, and just in groups and friends, all lots of fun. And I was running his really informal after-school football club where the kids just came and played. This was at primary school level. So he wanted to join a club and he joined a local club. And I was kind of taken aback really about what I saw, and that's really on kind of two levels, I suppose. The shouting and instruction that went on towards children just seemed to me to be beyond the pale, even though it seemed to be completely accepted by everybody who was on those pitches. But secondly, as a football fan, and although I've got no kind of formal background in football, I am a lifelong Liverpool fan. I brought up in the 80s and, really loved those kind of creative, artistic players who are so much part of the beautiful game. And I thought, how on earth are you going to have players coming from this kind of background when they're not made, even at 9, they can't make decisions for themselves? So we kind of looked around and looked to see if we could find alternatives. The club that we were at seemed to be pretty much a good representation of the state of youth football, sadly. And the option to us seemed to be to just start a club ourselves. That was not well supported initially, I have to say, by the county FA, who just thought we were stirring up a bit of trouble and maybe stealing other people's players, and we should just latch ourselves on to a local club and try and change them from within. I thought that was a really bad idea, turning up and saying, I'm Debbie, I've got a different way of doing things, let's do it my way. So we started in 2016, which means we're nearly 10 years old. We started on a local council pitch, so free football, just drop in sort of 10, 15 kids to start with, and we've developed from there over the years. And we've developed numbers, although we're still a small club, but we've certainly developed our philosophy around what it means to be part of Salisbury Rovers and what the club stands for. We've got a really clear idea, as you rightly put it, about the lens through which we see the game, and how we share that with our families who want to attend the club.
So you've can I ask how your sort of professional life has come into that? You've got a kind of background in human rights, is that right?
I have. So I am a solicitor. I have got a LLM and a PhD in human rights law, and I spent quite a bit of time out to practice working on research projects for a variety of organisations, including the Fundamental Rights Agency of the European Union, and writing about rights issues and about how we can frame social issues through the perspective of human rights as well. So I think that really connected with me, that kind of idea of the person, agency, autonomy, freedom, the beautiful game, and that human rights entitlement actually, and what it means to be human, what it means to be human in football. So that is where our kind of perspectives developed from.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. I think from all the this is obviously the fourth lens that we've looked through, if you like, every single one, the common theme that keeps coming up is autonomy.
Yeah.
For the players. So like you've kind of hinted at there, trying to take away this angry adult on the sideline shouting at children, and then sort of developing kids that can think of themselves, and then maybe developing life skills as well as the technical, tactical skills on the pitch. So what's your kind of approach to that? Is it quite a laissez-faire approach, and what would you still have a role for a coach in there, or is it pretty much just let them play?
Yeah, I mean, I think we would say that we've tried to reframe or redefine what a coach is in that context, and to give that a bit more of a human rights perspective. We wouldn't talk about developing the autonomy, we would talk about the person having evolving capacities. So we've got an individual before us, and we tend to think of children as just being in need of protection and support, but actually human rights law and the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child recognises their evolving capacities, and that's what we're trying to respect in their own development and try to help them lead that development. So fundamental rights like the right to be heard are actually central to that ability to evolve as a human being and develop all the life skills that you've mentioned that people need to be able to go and function as, you know, citizens in life. So we try to put the person first, and what that means is we have we spend a lot of time developing dialogue with anybody that we coach, and that can be children or adults, and trying to understand that there's a relationship between the coach and the person, but that the person is the person who leads the journey, and that includes children as well. So a typical example would be our Saturday sessions, where we have children throughout the morning coming down, and from the youngest ages, they'll, you know, we'll call in, we'll have a conversation. There may be 15, 20 children in a group. They're very used now to sharing their opinions in a group, and we talk about what the session should look like. And so it's very much led by them, where we respond flexibly to their needs and wants, and we try and frame the provision around what they want. And so at the end of that session, there's a reflection period and feedback. You know, was it good? Did you enjoy it? Can we do anything differently next week? What would you like to do next week? With the youngest, we do a thumbs up, thumbs down, which seems to work really well. Or, you know, not quite sure. And everybody after time will respond, no matter how quiet or maybe shy, you know, shy or insecure they are, because we're creating a safe space for that dialogue to happen. And the beauty in that kind of simple reflection is that children can then feed back why they're saying good or bad, or because we tried lots of other different tactics about feeding back, but that was the most direct. And they are really used to that now. So I think if a traditional coach came in and said, right, we're doing this, and off you go, they'd probably just say no. This is what we want to do, and that's really important. We are not creating environments of compliance. We're not creating environments where we're imposing discipline. We're creating environments of engagement, and so the children can create those social connections between themselves. And we have very, very little issues with, say, discipline or anything like that, because of the deep connection that children tend to have with their own environment, and that the fact that their voices are heard. So that then looks slightly different as we go through the club. But, you know, I've just coached our men's team yesterday, same principle. You know, we had a match on Tuesday, we reflected on it. I had some ideas, I wanted to hear theirs, and we together come up with a strategy for our next match. It's our first league match on Saturday, but they're the players on the pitch. You know, that they can see things that I can't see. They can understand the game in a way that I can't by just standing watching them. So we have to have that dialogue, but that needs, you know, an environment of safety there as well to be able to share.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Nice.
I mean, it's almost like it's done implicitly, I guess. You create the environment, and everything sort of seems to happen more organically. And interesting what you're saying about behaviour management. I think when you tend to have those sort of issues when it's too strict sometimes, and you can give too many rules to sort of rebel against. So yeah, it's interesting that you say you don't have many sort of behavioural issues.
Not at all.
So what's the role of the coach in this? I mean, like you say, it's not traditional. So I was kind of started coaching when the FA was still, everything was stop, stand still, command style.
So it's not that far away from it now either.
Yeah, in some ways, yeah, it's not evolved in some ways, but yeah. So how do you, what do you see the role of the coach in your kind of organisation, and how would you, maybe if someone does come in with a more traditional background, how would you maybe mentor them a little bit?
Yeah, so that role of the coach question, if we look at the way that I framed the as I say, Saturday session, the role of the coach there is very much to be engaged with the individual, to be really flexible, to ask questions, to understand what children of that age, whatever age they're coaching, really want. And so we're starting, this is why we're saying we're kind of reframing it. We're not starting with our session plan. I mean, so much of coach education still is, and I got partway through my UEFA C, and then just I've got better things to do. It starts with the session plan. Everything's on there. It's captured. What do I want as a coach? What returns do I want to see? What do I want my players to do? And although there's implicit underpinning there of like, well, you've got to know your players, it doesn't start with the players. And so what we try to say is actually that session plan, not important. Not important until you know who you're coaching. And then at the younger stage group, I would need to be seriously convinced that a 6-year-old needs any kind of formal coaching at all. Even a 10-year-old, what are we doing? Stepping into a play space with our own objectives and demands. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So in those kind of situations, our coaches are facilitators. And they are there to make sure the children are safe, that they feel that they're looked after, that they feel that they're part of a wider family, and that we can provide the playing environment that they want to see with their friends and that they want to partake in. As they get older, probably looks a little bit more like a traditional coaching setup, in the sense of, I will have a session plan, I will share that with my players, but it starts with them. So I never just pluck an idea and go, today, this is what everybody's going to be doing. It doesn't start like that. It starts with understanding where they are, who they are, what they want out of their game, what stage they're at, and a conversation about what that might look like if we design a practice. So it always starts with the players.
So Debbie, are some of those things like co-constructed with the players then?
Yeah.
So the coaches are very much with the players, and dare I say, working for the players?
Yeah. So we always say design with, not for. So that's the way we try and see things. And that should go throughout the club, really. And I think when we're talking about a very organic situation and things being kind of implicit, actually we are quite explicit as well. So even, with the men's team, I say explicitly to them, that my role is to facilitate the game for you, to try and help you be where you want to be and help you develop. It's not about me. And I think that's where coaching's become really, we've lost our way sometimes as coaches, because it has become about us. We've developed a coaching industry around what does the coach want, and we kind of need to shake that off a little bit. And we need to start to think about what we're really here for. And even when we have like positive conversations, it's often about us being loved. What do your players, do you want your players to love you? Do you want your players to remember you? It's like, I don't really know how that's ended up as part of a discussion about coaching the person in front of you on any particular day. For me, we're facilitators and we allow people to be able to play the sport of their choice. It's really not about whether we're loved or not, whether our session plan is great, or anything about our hero complex, really.
Debbie, I'm really interested in, you talked about you weren't getting, I'm probably going to go back a little bit if that's right. You were saying your son's experience wasn't, you didn't see it as being optimal, should we say. Your experience of grassroots at some point maybe wasn't giving your child, and you viewed other children maybe not getting what they want. You've set something up, and you've talked about tradition and how what were you seeing or not seeing that has made you think we need to change something here? There's a better version of children's sport, or children's football in this case.
Yeah, so I think it is the absolute denial of voice to the individual on who's part of the game, and as our thinking is evolved, I see this throughout the game now, having coached adult football as well. We are substituting our own decision making for the agency and autonomy of the player, no matter what age they are, and eventually that does something to us as human beings as well, because even if you're a child, you're turning up to play a game that you love, You want to play football, it's a game. And then someone comes in and makes it something quite different without even talking to you about why or whether that's a good thing. And we see that all the way through sport at the moment. And I think it's, in sport and outside sport, in our working lives, if we're not given the freedom to be ourselves and to be our authentic selves, then it is, it does undermine our sense of identity. And people who love sport, the football, as I say, is the beautiful game. The players that I know that have the flair and passion to play it is a fundamental part of who they are, and what we're doing is crushing it. Yeah, so that's what I saw, really, that crushing a sense of self, and identity.
Yeah, I mean, just reflecting on my own experiences, I've got 2 children, so my own experiences, sometimes it's more maybe about the coach's wants and needs, which might end up being a result on some kind of website or something like that, being taking priority over children's wants and needs, and maybe just want to play.
It's true, and I think it's not just about the way that sucks the joy out of football, particularly for children, but for adults as well. But we start to erode our own values then as well, because so often you see the problems that come from being on a touchline evolve through that focus on results solely. So people lose their heads, whether it's a friendly match or a kids game, because they're so result focused. So it has such a pernicious effect, because we lose perspective on all of this. We forget the human in front of us, and we lose our own kind of morality and values as well. So we just need to recenter what the importance of football is all about, which is connection, community, person development, integrity as well.
I wonder, I totally agree, and I'm sort of really on board with what you're saying as well. And I sometimes wonder whether it's league structures, and that being kind of the only thing, sort of certainly where we live, the only option is enter a league or not.
Yeah.
So then, because you're in that environment where there's a league, coaches may seem to think, well, that's important then.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point, Tom, because what we ended up doing within about a year of starting the club, after putting children in teams in leagues across our age groups, was pulling them all out. Right. Because we found that the environment we were trying to build and the freedom we were trying to create was absolutely antithetical to the kind of league model, which is all about structure. And even though they say at the younger ages the results don't count, we know they do. We know they do to adults, not necessarily to children. They really matter. So what we ended up doing was really saying we don't put our younger children in leagues at all. And our children, if they want to, our young people enter leagues at about under 15 age groups. And it hasn't made any difference. And parents aren't travelling around the county every Saturday or Sunday either. But if you're good at football and you get lots of playing opportunities and you play, it makes no difference that you're not.
You'll still be good.
You'll still be good. Kids in kits in teams in leagues. That's what, that's the kind of tagline that I've used, because, we just don't think that is the only way to play football.
I've got one more. Sorry, James. I'm hogging you, Debbie. Sorry.
That's all right.
The other thing that was really interesting, obviously, that is the traditional notion of what would grassroots football. I don't want to speak for any other sports, don't know them enough, but that's certainly my experiences, some of my experience with my children. And I've tried to adopt something not too dissimilar to you, being for the kids in my own grassroots practice. But obviously, that's a shift to what you're operating now. And how have you got people to come with you on that journey, which might be parents who are maybe brought with a certain type of football, coaches who may have a certain view, a traditional view of coaching? How have you managed to get people to come with you on this exciting journey?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And no, sorry, James, you asked before about coaches as well. I didn't pick up on that point, but that's one of the most difficult things, really. So just dealing with that kind of coaching point to start with. We've certainly had our ups and downs over the years. We've brought people on who say they get it and then they don't, and there's tension and conflict, and nobody wants that, and so we have to try and resolve that. And then we can't always expand the way that we want to, because it really is important to get people who are on message, delivering a model which is completely different. So what we've tried to do with our volunteers and our parents and families and children, because they're part of this equation as well, is be super clear about what we do and why we do it. So we've developed a whole range of material that is sent out. So anybody approaching the club who says, I'd like a place, we do sadly have a waiting list at the moment. They get a lot of material and an email which says exactly what we do and exactly what we don't do, and they're asked to reflect on that, and to not put their name down for a place if they don't think it's a good fit. Because what we've had in the past is that mismatch of expectations with coaches and with parents. And so I think if you're really clear about what you do, and we've got like simple infographics which explain that as well, then it becomes a lot easier to have that conversation. Like, we've talked about this, this is what we do. I appreciate you've got a different view, but this is our club and it's not going to change. And there are loads of other clubs out there doing things differently where you might be more comfortable. So sometimes the challenge is that the parent might feel like that, or the coach might feel like that, because when they actually see the reality of just letting children play, it's really, really hard because there's so much they want to tell them. But the child's loving it. And we have had those situations where I've had conversations with parents like, well, if you know what I'm going to say, if it's really not for you. And they'll sometimes say quite angrily, I know, but he loves it. So I've got to stay here, but it's driving me insane. And that's the feeling that you get. So it's not easy, but everybody deserves clarity around, the communication. I think the bar is set higher for us. If you go to other clubs, they're not telling you exactly what they do and what they won't do and what their philosophy is and why they do it. They're just a club. Yeah, the kids play football, but because we're doing something different, we've got to be really clear. We're not a broad church, and that's absolutely fine if you don't like what we do. Move along and try and find another place, really. So we do have to be quite hard.
Well, that's really good advice for any coaches out there. Is just be clear on what you're doing, and then people know where they are.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you. Go on, James. Sorry.
Yep. No worries. So I'm careful not to lead this question too much. What's you've got a men's team now? Is that fed through from younger age groups, and what's your retention like in terms of keeping players?
Yeah, so it's been varied over the years. What we've tried to do is find different ways to keep young people in the game. So when we tend to think about retention, we're always thinking of that as a youth football issue. What I've found as the club has grown is that it's very much an adult football issue as well. So even if we're bringing players along, they then hit adult football and the context can be very different. And adult football structures, even non-league now, they're paying players from even a step 6, and it becomes hugely competitive in terms of trying to get young people to get a place in a regular playing place in a team. So that's where we started to see the dropout. So this season we started to embark upon having our own team, and our under-16s have fed into that if they wanted to. So that's a real mix. The youngest player has just turned 16, oldest player is 45. We've got young men playing there, 3 refugees, one from Sudan, one from Ukraine, one from Syria. We've got people from different countries. It's like a wonderful mix of different people from different perspectives at the moment, along with the young people who are moving into there. So that's the way we've tried to develop the model now, in the hope that we can retain those who want to play. But we must recognise as a sport, not everybody wants to play 11-a-side football throughout their life. And I think that's where we need to start to think about, like we've tried to offer futsal as well. We've tried to offer drop-in sessions. We've got to think about the game a little bit more creatively. And we've tried to see retention as someone being 7 and they still end up in the adult team at 30 and, that's playing 11-a-side football. And we're just trying to think our way around that and adapt to offering provision that people want, if they want to stay in football, because they might not.
Yeah, so feedback from maybe new players who've come in that have experienced that other kind of more authoritarian kind of environment, if you like, I imagine that's been generally positive, is it?
It has. It's been overwhelmingly positive. which is great. I have coached with a men's team before, and that was a good experience. I was coaching alongside a coach who was a really positive coach as well, but that wasn't something we set up. So it's always a bit of a risk. What's this going to look like? How are people going to take it? But I just think there's a it's a kind of self-evident truth that people like to be respected, they like to be treated well, they like to have their views heard, they like to have conversations which show that someone knows they've been on holiday or taken an exam, or they just care,
Yeah,
and I think we just can forget that people like warm, friendly environments so that they can be their best, really. So that's gone down really well, and the lads are already supportive and support each other well as well.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't want to lead that too much because I my own sort of opinion on that, which is kind of corresponds with that. I definitely want to be somewhere where you've got a voice rather than you're being dictated to.
Yeah.
I've seen from some of your LinkedIn posts that you've kind of done some work with the likes of Paul McGuinness and Tony Whelan, Rick Fenolio.
Yeah.
So the question is, myself and Tom work in academies. How much of this do you think could transfer to an academy environment?
Well, I'd always say that if you take the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child as kind of the theoretical underpinning of the approach, then it takes us to this place that children have got rights irrespective of how talented we think they are. So there's no exclusion clause in the United Nations Convention that says children have got all these rights unless they're in an academy, in which case, go as hard as you want in terms of the training and don't give them a voice. So all of that is an imperative, actually, a legal and a moral imperative to implement and respect those rights across wherever children play. So any coach can start to look at ways of involving children, not as a tick box exercise, but as a real relationship exercise. How can we build dialogue so that this child feels safe? So that's one thing. You're in a structure which is challenging to rights, actually, as a model. And I say that not because of the people in it, but because of the purpose of it and the constraints on it. So, for example, I had a conversation with an academy coach at a conference in Romania recently, which is, say you had a 14, 15-year-old who says, I don't want to train 4 or 5 times a week and I don't want to live in digs. Is that allowed? No. So you've got a right to be heard, but that's hugely constrained, isn't it? Because it's actually the price of being part of this system is that we constrain your voice. Because the right to be heard is not just about your views being sought, it's about them being acted upon in accordance with your age and maturity. And when your children get to that age, their views should be really sought and really acted upon because they're old enough to know. So, but we've created a system which is in or out. You buy what we do or you leave. And that becomes really challenging, I think, particularly when a lot of those young men are never going to make it in professional football. And even if they do, they're still human beings who need to grow up and develop with the idea that they are more than a footballer and that they are more than just someone who kicks a ball for somebody else, that they've got their own identity and feelings which have got a right to be listened to.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that goes back to the honesty part at the start. So myself and Tom both got a sort of academy experience. I've seen it done horrifically badly, but I've seen it done quite well. So I think the first conversation you have to a child and the parent as soon as they step in the door is, your son's very, very unlikely to be a footballer. But, what can you get out of this academy system that's going to, employability skills, we call it psychosocial skills, that are going to help you develop as a person. And I think it says a lot about the recruitment. So I think you've done bits with Mark O'Sullivan as well. I know one of his things is about, as many as possible, as long as possible. So you're not making sort of snap decisions based on, maybe a teenage boy or girl who's maybe had a bad week at school, comes in and performs poorly, and then you kind of get released on the back of, those sort of things. But
and I think that's what we've got to look at what the system is there for as well. The purpose of the system, even though there's more of a remodeling of it or reframing of it as you say, you're probably not going to be a professional footballer, but let's see what you can get out of it. That's not the business model. That's not why academies exist, to help young people get things out of football. They actually exist to produce footballers either for the first team or footballers that can be sold. It is a business model. That doesn't denigrate the people working in it, But if we try and sidestep that truth, we are doing a disservice to children and young people. That's the reality of the model. So when you're saying you're probably not going to be a professional footballer, but let's see what you get out of it, the other side of that is, and is it worth it, given what you're going to have to sacrifice for the next 4, 5, 6 years? Yeah. Or would you be better playing grassroots and playing regular football with your mates? So there needs to be more honesty about what the system's about. It is not a community outreach programme. It really isn't. And I think there's a bit of a reframing around academies now about, look at the lovely things that they do. They went on a theatre trip, or they went, on a trip to Germany, or that's not what that is what the system is providing to those children who are within it. Great. But the purpose of the system is not to provide those trips. It's for something quite different.
We're just doing a piece in the academy I'm involved in around like holistic talent development. So the athletic skills, football development, physical development, and all that kind of stuff is there. But we're also really trying to hone in on like, how are we really preparing people for life outside the academy, when inevitably the vast majority, 90% aren't going to. So we're really trying to be intentional about what else are we giving them while they're here, and actually just their health and well-being. So we're really trying to hear their voice, find opportunities for them to have something to say. So we're trying to be much more intentional around our practices in our academy, and actually much more intentional about celebrating some of those other successes beyond the academy. So beyond, the names of first team players and things like that, what if somebody set up a business? What if somebody got a job? What if somebody went to university? What if somebody became a coach? They're all really good things.
Yeah. This is great. And it's great to see the move to, and I know I say the move, but the best coaches historically have been the coaches who think like that anyway. You mentioned Tony Whelan, who's absolute legend, and I'm very grateful for the time that Tony has given me over the years and the mentorship. He's always a source of incredible advice and perspective on young children and their development. I'm passionate about children's rights as well, really passionate. But I think we still get down to that problem of, if you've got a system where most of those children are never going to be footballers, why are they in that system? And we need to ask and answer that honestly. And I don't think we're having that conversation very honestly, actually. Could there be a better model? I'm thinking about, can we do this in a better way? Do we have to accept the way things are? Or can we reframe the whole process that's more child-centered and child-led?
I think it's there is, like you say, a lot of collateral damage kind of approach in there. But and as I say, I've kind of witnessed and been a part of some of the kind of sort of less kind of decent practice, I guess. But I think we can acknowledge as well, some academies do things really well. I mean, Arsenal, for example, their tagline is, they want to be the most caring academy in world football, not even mentioning kind of football or anything technical or anything like that. So I know the system is what it is, and maybe it is broken, but I think there is some good practice out there. And
I don't doubt it. And I wouldn't want anybody to think that this is just an academy bashing exercise, because I know many academy coaches, and also I've got huge respect. One of the patrons of the club is Mikey Harris, who's at Brighton, now was at Portsmouth. And there are lots, the really, really excellent coaches, passionate individuals who are involved in it. It's a systemic thing, and it's really hard to fix. But I think we don't fix anything in terms of systemic cultural problems unless we ask questions and try and search for solutions. And so I think, from being a little club, that's kind of what our big voice is, asking difficult questions and maybe not getting answers to them sometimes, or not knowing what the answers are, but we're prepared to ask them.
So I cut you off there, Tom. Were you going to say something?
No, but just in agreement, really. Offering questions, I think, is really important. And I think until if we talk about academy system, maybe somehow mandates that other outcomes beyond getting a professional contract are absolutely valid and can be celebrated. I think that's where we need to get. I think clubs are beginning to celebrate that, and are starting to be celebrated. Think about Crystal Palace aftercare programme, seems to be widely regarded as excellent. Club IMAT has got a head of holistic development as a staff role title, and I think there is these movements.
So
where we can capture and celebrate that is really important.
I think it's great to see those actual formalized movements towards positive, player-centered, child-centered practices is really important. I think other ideas that, setting up programs that involve the community, you mentioned Mark O'Sullivan, and Mark again is an incredible mentor and full of ideas and passion about the game and how we can put children first. Football is for children, not children for football, is a tagline that he uses a lot. But AIK, where he was, they kind of opened up their doors, didn't they? And children just came and played. And so we kept that kind of age limit open before they started bringing children into the academy setup. And, there are different ways, if we're creative and we're bold, that we could start to think about the problem as well, particularly if you include children in that discussion.
And thinking about, going back to coaches a little bit, I was involved in a discussion recently, and it was just a general discussion with some other coaches about coaching qualifications. We talked about the UEFA C and a lot of coaching qualifications, and I'm a deliverer on the UEFA C as well. It is largely no, not at all. It is largely, game models, principles of play, in possession, out of possession stuff. And there was a discussion that I had around, should the first thing we start telling coaches of any sport, this was at the recent UK coaching conference, about what it means to be a children's coach. And I wonder whether that needs to be a starting point of, if you're going to engage with children, this is what it means to be a children's coach before we worry about X's and O's.
Yeah, I'd even take it further back than that, which is, what do children think it means to be a children's coach? Because I think we tend to have these discussions between ourselves a lot, and particularly when we're trying to look at how we can improve the game so it is more child-centered. As coaches, we've got to think about including children in that discussion at every single level. So there's always whatever kind of social change around rights and cultural movements to improve equality across gender, race, whatever it may be. The tagline is "Use nothing about us without us." And I think we've got to start thinking about that a little more. So what should these coaches look like, courses look like if we're coaching children? Well, let's ask children to be part of it as well, because what frustrates me is that you rock up and you're supposed to just design something for a group of players you've never met, who are probably just sitting on a course with you, who are men, almost certainly men, from different ages, and that bears no relation to coaching children whatsoever. And it certainly bears no relation to the way that I would coach whoever it is. So for me, I don't work in the industry, so do I need the qualification? That was the question that I really kind of asked myself and battered around for quite a long time after starting out. Put it off, and then just started it, and then I thought, no, it's going to be too much of a battle all the time about the way we coach compared to the way we're taught to coach, really. Starting with our children's coaches idea, but can we build up a picture of what children want from coaches? That's a really important part of it, I think.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the work about Amanda Visek and Fun Maps, and that started to get a bit of an insight into really what children wanted, and it was
winning was not there at the top, was it?
Nowhere near. Have fun, be cared for, be respected.
Yeah,
it was those kinds of things.
Play with your
really
friends.
Important. Yeah.
And you'll see that, because when we got this philosophy sometimes, haven't we, with coaches who'll say, even at grassroots where they're creaming off children for elite teams, then they'll say, but the best is to play with the best to get better. If you ask kids, they want to play with their mates, and even if their mate is not as good as them, they'd rather have their mate in the team than some other kid that they don't really know, because that's the relationship part of football. It's so important, and there's so many other things you can learn from playing with your mates or in mixed ability groups, that far exceed a win, really.
That's definitely a longer game, isn't it? Definitely. That's great. James?
So I think that's really interesting you're saying about, you do see some clubs you've got maybe they have their academy team, and then they have maybe one or two shadow squads as well. So you say, that's just stopping players going and playing grassroots football and playing with their mates. But going back to the coach education bit a little bit, I love that idea of asking the kids. Why haven't we thought that before? So careful how I put this, but I think coach education's not in a great place in this country at the minute with the FA for various reasons. That's not having a go at the FA. I think there's kind of logistical and financial reasons for that, and maybe a bit of a hangover from lockdown. But yeah, like Tom said, you do there's a little bit, I think, on the level 1, but now that's moved online, so you don't have any interaction. Level 2, level 3, certainly when I did it, was like Tom said, it was all technical, tactical. And then the Advanced Youth Award, to be fair, there's lots of brilliant stuff on there, and that does look at coaching the individual, but that's level 4. So you know, what are we doing at levels 1, 2 and 3, as Tom said, to kind of address the actual, you know, the human part of it, rather than just the X's and the O's. So yeah, I think I love that as an idea. Why don't we ask the kids?
And introducing the ideas, just the simple concepts around voice, you know, and the right to be heard was part of the game. We have seen that a little bit in terms of safeguarding, but we can't just see it as a matter of protection. I mean, if you create a safe space, children are hopefully safer. So that is part of safeguarding, but it's more than that. It's about participatory rights. It's about being able to make decisions about how you play and what play looks like. But that, you know, you've got to be realistic as well. It's pretty threatening, just on a simple level, isn't it, to a lot of coaches? If you say, ask your players whether they like, you know, what you're doing, because they might turn around and say no. I mean, it happens all the time at our club. As I say, if you had a traditional coach come in and say, right, we're doing this now, you probably get, I can think of one young man in particular who'd lie on the floor going, boring. So yeah, and that's hugely threatening. And so we've got to lighten up a little bit about that, and just realise once we get through that, then we start working with them, and the game looks pretty much the same as we wanted it to start with, but now we're taking them with us on the journey, or they're taking us with them.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think probably just, you know, I think we're getting towards the end of our conversation, and I just think, like, what you're offering, from what I'm hearing, is something much more to children than a scoreline.
Yeah, I would hope so. Yeah, I was going to say that the 2 boys I talked to, well, 2 young men, one was my son and another player who'd been with us since the start, to Romania to speak about their journey through the clubs, and they did PowerPoints that they created themselves, and spoke in front of, you know, kind of international audience. It's like that I've seen them on that journey all the way through, and that's not the first time that they've spoken and shared their experiences as well. And, you know, that's the development of young people who give you huge amounts of hope in a world sometimes which feels that it hasn't got a great deal of hope around and joy, and that's what we want, to be able to provide environments where we can snatch that joy, we can, you know, share it together, and then we can watch our children grow into wonderful young people.
Yeah, brilliant. And have you got any, like, you might not be there yet in the history of the club now, but have you got any examples of children that have come through the system and had a success that isn't football?
Well, I mean, children have gone to university and done their own thing, and just also children from backgrounds who, one boy in particular, I would say, when I met him and have known him for nearly 10 years, you would never, ever in a million years have thought he would be at university now, but he is. And just those small examples of just that connection all the time, because our role as a coach, doing community work as well, has been always to be there, to talk to share ideas with, to solve problems with, you know, even if that's like, how do I find a house, or what do I do if my manager at work's just told me I can't do this shift that I've committed, you know, all those questions I get asked. It's like the conversations we have to and from football has been, you know, some of the most interesting conversations you can have. And how do you understand the tax system, and you know, all these sort of life skills that go on because you're a trusted individual in their life, and they might not have that elsewhere. And so those small successes, you see them grow and get jobs, and that's a joy.
Yeah, magic. That's really good. Go on, James.
Yeah, that's it from me, really. So yeah, I've been kind of following the project and that for a while on LinkedIn, and yeah, thank you so much for coming on. You're doing some amazing work, and I'll be following it keenly in the future.
Thank you so much for inviting me on, and it was an honour to share a bit of our story with you. It's always nice to talk about the club, and hopefully that'll help other people who might think, I could do a little bit of that.
Yeah, thank you.